And welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Last Friday, Kyle Rittenhouse was acquitted of all charges against him in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Just 2 days later, a black nationalist BLM supporter drove an SUV through a Christmas parade in Waukesha, Wisconsin. It was a slaughter. 6 people were killed, including 3 grandmothers and an 8-year-old boy. 47 people were injured very badly, many of them children. Here's one witness's description of the scene.
We were sitting, my daughter was sitting at my feet, and I was standing above her, and what I saw was a red SUV run over a gentleman. I think it was a gentleman in a costume, and his body was trampled by both the front and the back wheels.
Police say the man who did this is a career criminal called Darrell Brooks. As of tonight, Brooks has not publicly explained why he committed mass murder. Instead, the media and local authorities have decided to speak for him. And the main thing they want you to know is that these killings had absolutely nothing to do with the Kyle Rittenhouse verdict just 2 days before. Nothing whatsoever. The timing is just one of those amazing coincidences. Quote, "There is no evidence that this is a terrorist incident," announced Waukesha's chief of police. But if indiscriminately murdering women and children at a Christmas parade isn't terrorism, then what exactly is it? Well, it's a vehicular mishap. Here's how Twitter's in-house news team described it. Quote, 5 people dead and more than 40 injured after car drives through parade. Car. It's the fault of the red SUV. Other news organizations had another explanation handy. It turns out, they told us, that Brooks was fleeing from a knife fight. And the implication, of course, was that he got spooked and drove through the parade by accident, as you do. Then MSNBC took this theory a step further and suggested the police had somehow goaded Darrell Brooks into driving into people by firing a gun at him. Watch.
The reports from NBC reporters is that maybe he was in a fight, a knife fight, an altercation, or a stabbing. Well, I've been to stabbings, and I'm telling you, they're very bloody events. And the perpetrators or the participants often have blood all over them, even if it's coming from a victim they stabbed, or they may get cut themselves if it's a knife fight. And they often run with the bloody knife. So this guy might have been in the car, bloody knife, blood all over him. He saw the police barricade at the parade route, busted through it, the officer fired, and then he was going to do anything, he or they, to get away when he ran over these band members in just an act of really cold-blooded murder.
So Brooks was doing whatever he could to get away from the police. So effectively, it's the cops' fault. Except no, that's not what happened. Many eyewitnesses, described Brooks zigzagging down the street, trying to murder as many innocent people as he could. These killings were absolutely intentional. And no, Brooks was not being chased by the police. That's a lie. So much for that theory. So the question remains, why did Darrell Brooks commit mass murder in Waukesha? The media don't seem interested in finding out, not even a little bit. So they've decided to ignore the story completely. And they are. Subpoenas to Roger Stone from some fake congressional committee are apparently more important than 6 deaths. Like the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, as far as the national media are concerned, it's simply not happening. The more we learn about Darrell Brooks, the easier it is to understand why the media don't want to talk about him. Brooks's social media feeds are full of racist and black nationalist propaganda. In one of his rap songs, he includes lines from Malcolm X justifying race hate against whites. He posted a picture of a fruit bowl arranged to display the letters BLM with a raised fist. And not insignificantly, Brooks also criticized the jury's verdict in the Kyle Rittenhouse case. On Facebook, one BLM activist was happy to connect the dots here. He describes Brooks's mass murder as retaliation for the Rittenhouse acquittal. Watch.
Got somebody in custody. We may have to wait and see what they say about why this happened. But it sounds like possible that the revolution has started in Wisconsin, starting with this Christmas parade. The initial person who reached out to me said that they believe that this has to do with the verdict.
This has to do with the verdict. That's the obvious conclusion. Is it true? Again, we have not confirmed it, but we can be absolutely certain that the national media will spend 0 time trying to find out. Why? Because they're implicated. News organizations spent more than a year telling us that a case that had precisely nothing to do with race was somehow a referendum on the civil rights of black people and the rise of white supremacy. So if it turns out those lies, and they are lies, got 6 people murdered, they'll probably be the last to tell us that. We do know that Darrell Brooks never should have been on the street in the first place. He was a thoroughly loathsome person. Want evidence? Well, watch him here brag about pimping his 16-year-old girlfriend.
All of a sudden, now I'm a pedophile. Let me explain that. 10 years ago, 2006, I caught a case with my oldest daughter's mama. Yes, my baby mama. I didn't know the was 16 at the time. She gave a statement to the police and told them, yeah, she was hoeing, that I was pimping, and that she was 16, and that I didn't know that. Okay?
Yeah. So for some reason, this guy has spent most of his life free. A few weeks ago, probably not surprisingly, he was charged with punching the mother of his latest child in the face and then running her over with his car. So he should have been in jail for that. But the Milwaukee County District Attorney, a radical called John Chisholm, released Brooks on $1,000 bail. So $1,000 for beating and running over a woman. Why? Well, because John Chisholm believes that bail is racist. A few years ago, Chisholm acknowledged that letting violent criminals out of jail was certain to cost innocent lives. But, he explained, it's still worth it because equity. Quote, is there going to be an individual I divert or I put into a treatment program who's going to go out and kill somebody? You bet. Guaranteed. It is guaranteed to happen. It does not invalidate the overall approach. In other words, the deaths of innocents, old ladies, small children, are a small price to pay because the principle of equity is so beautiful and so important. That is a diseased way of thinking. It's how cult leaders and dictators think. It is not a Western worldview. But suddenly it's a mainstream position within the Democratic Party. Watch Jonathan Swan of Axios try to get Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib of Michigan to explain what would happen if we closed all federal prisons in this country, as she is demanding.
To what extent have you wrestled with any potential downsides of releasing into society every single person who's currently in a federal prison?
Yeah, I think that everyone's like, oh my God, we're going to just release everybody. That's not
That's
what
what
I'm...
the fact
Yeah,
is.
but did you see how many people are mentally ill that are in prison right now?
No, I know, but the act that you endorsed actually says release everyone in 10 years.
But think about it. Who are releasing?
But there are like human traffickers,
oh, I know,
child sex. So, but you're saying, do you mean that you don't actually support that? Because you endorsed the bill.
No, I endorsed the BREATHE Act.
Your proposal is so sweeping. It does release everyone. And what I'm trying to say to you
within 10 years, and obviously there's a process of looking at how can we get away from mass incarceration and move towards care first.
Totally unbothered. Human traffickers? Yeah. Rashida Tlaib doesn't care. In the end, she refused to give Swan a single example of any criminal, no matter how violent or how dangerous, who ought to remain behind bars. Not one. So what would happen if we did this, if we actually emptied the prisons, as Democrats are demanding? We're getting a taste of the consequences right now by watching what's happening in the San Francisco Bay Area. Here's what it looks like. There's nothing equitable about that. It's theft. Big picture, it's anarchy. It's violent chaos in which the weak will always suffer the most. Why do we have civilization in the first place? Precisely to prevent scenes like that. So you've got to wonder why they're encouraging it. Tulsi Gabbard is a former member of Congress from the state of Hawaii, and we're happy to have her join us tonight. Congressman, thanks so much for coming on. So you've been saying for a while that this trend of racializing everything, particularly things that have nothing to do with race, like the Kyle Rittenhouse trial, is going to lead to a bad place. Are you concerned that we may be seeing that bad place?
We are headed down a very dangerous path, and right alongside that, down this dangerous path, is the fact that we have politicians, we have activist judges, we have prosecutors who are not enforcing the law, people trying to defund the police, people who have really screwed up priorities, who seem to be more interested and caring more about protecting criminals than actually protecting our community, which is really the most fundamental, basic responsibility of our government, is to keep our people and our communities safe. And what we're seeing now as a result of these screwed up priorities, Tucker, is anarchy, chaos, and people getting hurt and loss of life on our streets. And this is a you know, you've given a few of these really key examples here, and how crazy it is that we have people who are guilty of, maybe are accused of petty crimes, who pose no threat to the community, locked up in jail, and then you have violent felons who are let out, whether it's a bail of $500 or $5,000 or $50,000, doesn't matter the amount. They are let out onto our streets, continuing their terror sprees. It's crazy.
I always think as I watch this, how does this help the weak? I mean, every politician talks about how, you know, and it's true, our civilization exists to protect the weak, not the young and strong and heavily armed, but people who need help protecting themselves. That's why we have civilization. They're the ones who get completely shafted by this. They're the ones who get killed.
They're the ones who suffer the most because of this broken system. And unless we do something, unless leaders in our country do something to actually fix this very broken system, I am deeply concerned that we will continue to see the kind of the horror that we've seen play out over in Wisconsin and in different parts of the countries, just continuing to get worse.
I wonder, I mean, nobody is for this. It doesn't matter what political party you belong to. The number of people who are for emptying all of our prisons or letting, you know, murderers out with no bail, it's like, what percentage of the population is actually for this?
I have no idea the answer to that question. I think it's so irresponsible for politicians to sit there and make these proposals that, okay, we're just going to get rid of prisons. But as you saw in that clip, there doesn't seem to be an actual plan. And all of their words might sound warm and fuzzy to them. Wait until somebody comes and threatens them, their child, their sister, brother, their loved one. Then it gets real very quick. We shouldn't wait for that to happen. Our communities can't wait for their own families to be threatened because of...
Maybe people who have publicly funded bodyguards should recuse themselves from these conversations because they're not feeling the effects of their own policies.
Well, maybe they should go and meet with some of the families who have been affected by murderers who are in these prisons.
Yeah. Man, thank you. Tulsi Gabbard, a blast of common sense as always. We appreciate it. Great to see you.
Thanks, Tucker.